can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Ed Crain of Kingstar Media. Ed, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. This is part of the Top Agency series, but also Top Direct Response series. I think, Ed, in my business life and life, things are rooted in direct response and relationships. Like those two things are really the foundation for how I think about things. And so I love having people like you on who are experts and have been. I had your son on, Jeff, talk about it. And he's like, you have to have my dad on. He's the OG of direct response. I knew you were shooting infomercials and really rooted in direct response going way back. I had Ron Popeil on. That was a great interview. Talking about direct response, infomercial king. I had just Brian Kurtz and some other people who just really specialize in direct response. And those are some of my most fun interviews. So check those out. You can go to Inspired Insider and just type in direct response and see what shows up. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host so they can create amazing relationships and really create amazing content and most importantly, run their business. So for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Ed Crain. He's the president and CEO of Kingstar Media. It's one of Toronto's leading performance marketing agencies. Ed has over, I won't gauge you, several decades of experience in planning, buying, optimizing offline and online media for some of the world's top brands. We'll talk about the mind behind working with Jack LaLanne, if you've heard of him, David Wolf, and the NutriBullet, Fran Tarkenton's infomercials, if you didn't realize, and Vince Offer. If you don't know what Vince Offer is, you may have heard of the ShamWow. So, Ed, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jeremy. Nice to be here, and thank you for having me.
Just start off and talk about the company and the origins of the company.
Sure. So, I don't want to go on too long, but I really came from, I think I want to say performance because, I was a childhood actor to some degree in my hometown of Ottawa. But when I went to university, I was going to be an urban planner. I had all these plans to change and rebuild the world. And then I really fell back to kind of wanting to get somewhere in touch with performance and engagement. So I ended up, I think, the first time I shot a product, somebody said to me, well, we can't pay you a lot of money, but we'll pay you this and we'll pay you a small royalty. And that was called Dance Mix USA, a CD with KTEL. And that was actually sort of the beginning of learning this business where I could create a commercial and I could put it on television and garner a response. In those days, it was a phone number. Today we've transitioned what I call the same ROI tactics to use television and radio, even out of home now to try to, drive engagement. We work with Trivago, with Clear Scores, Leo Vegas, Babbel, Generac. There's a lot of clients that we help in the Canadian market to get to scale on television. These companies usually come with pretty qualified in-house digital intelligence, and we try to bring them to the Canadian market. But Yeah, the early days of the infomercial business, you mentioned relationships, and I can't agree with you more. My relationships with people like Jack LaLanne for 10 years, and one of Jack's things was like, I would always mention techniques about how we could sell more juicers, and Jack would go, Ed, I I, I really only care that people change their lifestyle, that they become healthier, that they change the way they're eating, that they work out, that they exercise. So it's interesting. That's passion, right? And I think at the end of the day, if you can find with a pitch person, a spokesperson, a client, a team, what their passion is, and you can create content and you can deploy that content, that's kind of the passion that I find. And that comes with relationships with companies that are driven and they want to get their message out there and they want to do it with the best spokespeople available in the market that are genuine. And that was really why I loved in the infomercial business. It became the first way to kind of engage large groups of people with a long format television commercial. And they were fun. Like, I think Sirius says, when has ever advertising been good? Well, it was actually fun and good for, for a long period. And creatively, you can still do that today. I think you do it differently, but I think you can do it.
So did you start having other companies come to you? You mentioned the Dance Mix USA of similar nature, wanting to get on TV and do direct to consumer.
Absolutely. And I think we always talked about, the separation between, brand and response. And a lot of, when you get into the whole brand discussion, there, like companies that are starting out, and I think where we continue to find our sweet spot is engaging with companies that are in or just past startup mode, and they're looking to hone that messaging. They're looking to work with a partner that isn't, just there to place, a brand ad that they've maybe developed themselves. They're looking for that partnership saying, how do we get a response? How do we measure a response? How do we get a return on investment? And obviously in direct response, it was, a CPO. So it was very simple. You spend $1,000 in media, you get 2,500 back. That's kind of a break even in the old days. And, we were getting some 3-to-1s, 4-to-1s, 5-to-1s. You mentioned Power Rider with Fred Tarkington. I think out the gate, that was probably like a 5-to-1. So it's a no-brainer to buy $1,000 in media time and have $5,000 of sales. And I think that's always, how many times you go to the plate to get a hit. So that was the old days. And I think it's evolved today. I don't think companies they don't approach the market the same way. There's a whole lot of different tactics to employ before you would get to linear television. And I think the development of the messaging, the partnership, the relationships, working with companies, that's where, it's always the people that put in the extra 20% of time, all the ones that want to beat their control. And that's what I loved about direct response. And I would tell everybody, and I would say, listen, you've got a spot up there getting a response. I said, don't be satisfied. Don't sit back in your lawn chair. Like, test against it. Like, try to beat the control. And that was, I think, the best part of the business was that we would look at, and today, I think that's even more true with the deployment of media, and especially in digital media. You're doing something every week. You're doing video blogs. You're doing revamping a message. You're changing a background. You're changing a font. You're trying something different to see if you can get a viral response. But there's no prescription for that. It's just really hard work.
I think that's, add maybe your next book called Beat the Control.
Yeah.
I want to, I love things rooted in direct response principles. 'Cause like you say, even if it's online, even if it's a video online, or if it's an ad, it could be paid or whatever it is. it's really rooted in direct response principles. I want to talk, you mentioned the Fran Tarkenton, I don't know if you know, the Power Rider, if that's a good example, and walk me through a little bit. It starts with planning it and the messaging on it. Walk me through, how did that happen in the first place with the Fran Tarkenton?
Well, I think really I got contacted by a company out of California, and I'd worked with them before. And we just creatively, you talk about a relationship. And there was a company that I worked with, and, they said, listen, we've got this product, and it's called the Iron Horse. And I was like, oh. And they showed me the product, and it's the seated exercise where you kind of go up and down like this, right? And the first meeting, I was like, so you want to call it the Iron Horse? and I was like, so that's where I start scratching my head. And so we creatively get together, and they said, listen, we've got an outreach, and actually there was a product on television at the time called the Health Rider. And I'm trying to remember the host of that, but that product was on air for about $400. And this version that we could do with the Power Rider came out like under $200. And we thought we had a value statement. Then they were able to attach the football player Fran Tarkenton, and it's kind of that would appeal to me. I mean, I don't want to get too off topic, but the Minnesota Vikings, the coach was at one point up in Winnipeg and coached the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and my father was the quarterback. So it's like a connection. I have a connection to like football, a quarterback, Fran Tarkenton. So I was very excited to do the project. And, they gave me
a hand in Fran Tarkenton, or how did that brainstorm go of who should represent this product?
I think that we basically, as I remember, there were a number of names bantered around, and everybody just stopped when they said, you can get Fran Tarkenton. And it was a stop. Like, if we could get him, this was like going to be a successful project. So I can't say I had a hand in signing him. The California company.
No, I'm just curious how the thought process goes in, from the beginning. And it sounds like even the beginning, the name, it sounds like you were very nice about it. But basically was basically said, are you sure you want to call it the Iron Horse?
Yeah.
How did that go over? And were you then kind of just saying, we've already seen this product and this type of name work better?
Well, I don't think if you're going to go against the Health Rider with the Iron Horse, I think you got a problem, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, it's not rocket science. You get a guy that's an NFL quarterback, and then you got the name Rider. I think we can do better than Iron. So, Power came up, and that was really kind of like, again, it was the California group that was really involved in, signing the talent and obviously clearing the name and everything else. So at the end of the day, I was like execution at that point. But it's, I'll never forget the day he arrived here in Toronto, and we went up to a mall north of Toronto, and we had a fitness lady named Cami O'Neill, and she was like a top fitness expert. And I'm trying to think, she was like on she was like a fitness model, but also she was in fitness shows, not unlike there were like fitness shows, like she was an aerobics person. Anyways, very nice lady, very fit. We shot the show, but you ask, like a lot of times in those days, it was, you had the ingredients, and then you get to the set. And, we shot 2 days, I think, long days, like 12-hour days. But there's a lot of, figuring out what works. And I think that was the magic of kind of that time, was that you really had good relationships, good people, committed people to try to make this work. Nobody wants failure. And especially if you've got someone like Fred Tarkington on set. You know, he's not going to walk away from a take that's not good, and neither am I. And so I think a lot of it was, you know, we in those days we always had budget concerns. We didn't get, you know, millions of dollars to shoot these. So we were trying to be very efficient. You know, there were times I remember in that shoot, there were times when people would say, well, you've got the same people in one scene in the background, and they change in the next scene. And I'm like, well, you know, that was edited. So if somebody was going to, you know, arrest me on continuity, they'd have a good case. But the performance, like when we got that pitch correct and we had the value statement, I mean, it was a very successful infomercial for the time. And I remember it as really the start of my career in long form. And then, you know, I had, like, I think that led later to working with, you know, Jack LaLanne, and later to working with people on the NutriBullet. But it was, you know, it was really that core, that period where you learned that you could get all the right ingredients in a room and you could make a show. And that came from my background. I was in entertainment television before that at the flagship station here for the CTV network. And it goes back, and I know I tell these old stories, but I'd go in and I'd say, well, what's the next project? And he'd go, Ed, you know what? It doesn't really matter. There's 1,000 scripts on the side. Put your hand in, pull one out. The only thing that matters is who we put on it and the budget I give you. I would say, okay, you know, and I don't believe that that's all true. But at the end of the day, you know, you've got to approach a project. And I always say to people, the worst turn you can make is the wrong turn 10 feet out of the gate. Because if you do that, you know, then I don't care how many experts you bring on board. You've taken the wrong left turn. So I say, you know, that's the focus of getting your pitch correct. And that's why you go back and you've interviewed these pitchmen and these people who have stood at, you know, national exhibitions, pitch grounds, flea markets, and they get people to stop and watch them. And they do that because they're masters of engagement. So a lot of times I would say I recognized good pitchmen and I sought out working with good pitchmen. And aside from being a great football player, Fred Tarkington was a pretty good pitchman. Like, he got on that, like, he was genuine and people trusted him. And I think that's something, you know, when we talk about the medium of television, whether it's linear or programmatic, like if you get your brand, if you're starting a business and you have a really well-oiled machine digitally, you know, you're still fighting against everybody else that has the same thing. So how do you get a separator? And so I think that's even in the early days, and today, you know, you can graduate to television and use it properly to engage audiences in a medium that they still trust for the most part.
So, Ed, my question is talking about the elements. You mentioned getting the pitch correct and the value statement. So I want to talk about some of those elements of what to you is, you're like, okay, we hit it. This is it. So just to recap those, that okay, with the Power Rider, you had good product, good pricing, good name, good spokesperson. Now you have the content. What are some of the elements you look for in that pitch that need to be there?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I want, and it's interesting, you know, we just finished, you know, somebody, I think it was, I'm trying to think, Willful, like selling wills online, a company, and we shot like testimonials, right? And well, you asked me about that and why I bring that up, because I still think really well shot testimonials are critically important. You have the center of your pitch. Like even if in an infomercial you have real estate, so you've got to get to your offer. Your offer is going to be somewhere between 2.5 minutes and 3.5 minutes. That's hard sell. That's pretty much, you know, everything. If you spent the first third of your infomercial, you know, trying to draw people in, like create some excitement on set, oh my God, there's Fran Tarkington. Oh, look, the set looks beautiful. Whatever it is you've got that you're trying to build a story at the end, and then testimonials come in. Testimonials that really, today, like, it's still important to see people that you can relate to that are verifying a product. Often that's now done online, whether it's through some scores people get on products are done still through some form of testimonial or approval by the consumer. So in those days, that was a really important ingredient. So I would think that I wanted to make sure that the ingredients were there. If I've got the star, I've got the co-star, I've got the pitch, I'd go, well, then, what else can I add? I can add real people. I can add engagement. I can add trust. I can try to build a level of authority that the hosts have been given to pitch this product, and that comes from the consumer. So if it feels genuine, I'd always really, really search for that moment. And I remember technique shooting. A lot of shows and programs you'd see, if there was a demonstration, and if the camera's zooming in, and you get 3 cuts in the middle of that zoom, guess what? You don't trust it, right? So performance sometime, I don't, if it was an exercise machine, a pressure cooker, I mean, working with Kathy Mitchell and her sandwich makers, and, it was like, no, we got to get the demo correct. And you cannot cut in the Zoom, right? Like, people have to trust that that's actual demonstration. So I really focused a lot on that in the early days. And people would say, well, no, that was a good take. You can cut that. I'd go, no, I can't. I said, you have to get this correct. And so you'd have to have that moment where you actually had, the camera movement was genuine, the people got the performance right, and the demo came off perfect. And I think that's the element of trust.
Or you lose trust.
Or you lose trust and you lose sales. And so you've got people, if you've done your job in the first third and you'd hit them with the first offer, and then you get into the second third and you hit them with the final offer. I mean, the stats in those days were that most people hit the buy button after seeing a version of the infomercial 3 times. So it wasn't that they were buying in the first, so it then becomes, a kind of a strategy too, because you want to make sure that, in whatever market you're airing the infomercial, that you've got enough playtime to actually create that engagement. So you can't just, shoot an infomercial, test it, for 2 days and go, oh, I didn't make it. No, you have to create, because that's still the authority. It's like, I would say to people, I would say, if you're going to meet somebody in a restaurant or a bar or something like that, and you're sitting there and you see something on the air, you may have seen that at home before, but now you're seeing it again. You're still not going to click on it. Maybe the next time you're at home and it's late at night, you actually click the order button, because now you've seen it 3 times and you're kind of going, actually, that's a pretty good pitch. I like that story. They're genuine. I think that'll work, right? And so it's just an interesting process. And I think that's still here today. Obviously, somebody said to me years ago, they said, attention spans are 10 minutes and shrinking by a minute every year. So what are we down to now? 18 seconds on TikTok? Like, it's really shrunk, right? But I still think you need to create engagement in, different deployments of media. And some of them should be a longer form of engagement. Yeah. So if like, I see even today on the sports channels, I see big brands running like a 1-minute commercial, and it's like a little story commercial, right? And I'm thinking that's kind of like the new infomercial, because they're actually using it to create engagement, trust, and a contact with the consumer, with their potential consumer. So the infomercial business was, in the early days, was like that. And, the promise was, really evaluated by the consumer, is that genuine? You know, if you had Fran Tarkington, you know, he's a genuine athlete. If you had Jack LaLanne, I mean, he's an icon, right? I mean, if he's telling you, this was a guy that I remember, he's 87 years old, and we're on set one day, and he gets in an armchair, okay, and he pushes up and goes into a handstand in his suit, okay? Like, that guy is genuine. If he's telling you to drink juice and buy this,
Sign
you
me
should
up.
buy it, right? So that's how I felt about him.
What about, there's a lot of elements even in the content piece. And you mentioned a couple times there's a first offer, second offer, third offer. What are some pieces of the offer that must be there?
Well, obviously, I think that there's a demonstration of the product. So you want to see what I call a magical transformation. So that was always, the key. Your magical transformation can be, fat to slim. It can be gooey to like well-formed for a cake or a bun or a sandwich. But, you have to have that magical transformation. And you've touched on that in the first third. You got to nail it in the CTA, right? You got to nail it in the call to action. So the call to actions got to be the best collection of those magical transformations that you have. And then I still think it has to have maybe your best testimonial, somebody that they relate to. And then you have to do your value proposition. And you have to go down that string where, this is the price that it's, available now, but wait, there's more. We're also going to give you this. And then there's a countdown. There's only 1,000 left and it's counting down now. You better get in. So there's all those techniques. There were those techniques in those days. I don't know. I still think that works in home shopping today.
I mean, if you look at it, price anchoring,
yeah,
scarcity, all those things are timeless marketing principles, I think.
Yeah, they are. I mean, we went through in the last couple of years, we started probably a year ago, like with a line that this product is in our warehouse and ready to ship, and we'd show like the warehouse and the forklift and the product going, because people were, ordering stuff that wasn't arriving. And we know that was because there were supply chain problems. So you had to build some trust. We do stuff in Canada that because we'll put the little Canadian flag there and the .ca, so people will trust that it's coming from a warehouse in Canada, and they're not going to be waiting for something coming from China or the US or something that's going to take 8 weeks and they don't want it anymore and they can't send it back. So I think there's that element of it too, right? And so I think like today we're still like today's clients that you probably talk to Jeff a lot about. My son in that supports the digital side of our business. A lot of those products and services are, they're still using some of those techniques with testimonials. They're trying to create, what is your magical transformation on a credit score? It's like, well, that you can access it right away in your telephone. And it's like, so that's, I mean, there still has to be an offer and a pitch. And I think that, there, like I said, the attention span is lower, but you still have to run through those techniques in your offer. There has to be value and there has to be a promise. And I think that you need to do that efficiently, and you need to do it in the formula of a lot of time that you have.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of it, revolves around trust and credibility. And what was the expectation going into this campaign of like, okay, I think we're going to sell X amount, and what actually happened?
I think it's changed. Like there was in the old days of the business, I think, companies would say, okay, you know what, we're gonna try 40 products. We're gonna shoot 40 products. We're gonna do 40 TV tests. And if we get if we get a single, a double, a triple, and one home run, we're fine. And the rest are in the garbage. And so that was that one winner would pay for a lot of non-winners. So that is not the case today. I think it kind of works differently. So we will work with a client and say, let's, and again, I use companies like, these companies like Trivago, they have data scientists on board. They've got huge digital teams. They're coming to work, television and try to build awareness. So you're still going out there and you're trying to build on top of that digital base. So if a client comes and it's a mid-level company that's trying to break into the market, Jeff's gonna take that client. Jeff's my son, who is VP of sales and runs our whole digital team. But he's gonna take that client and he's gonna do the Facebook testing. He's gonna try Instagram. He's gonna basically do a lot of testing on the digital front to see what message resonates where. And then once we can build a base and we can start to test television, then we have a better idea of what's working and how we can grow that business, because television will still drive engagement, and so will radio. Radio is surprisingly responsive these days for certain offers. So and as is out of home. Out of home's come a long way, I think, from billboards. Now you have you have all of the data available for video billboards, from passing traffic from cell phones. Obviously programmatically you can run a offer, and a lot of times what Jeff will do is go out and, we might have a test budget of $30,000 in CTV, but we'll save $10,000 for retargeting when we get the results. And then we're digging deep into the retargeting and really trying to prove a case to expand that, right? That's different than this, let's shoot 40 commercials and see if we get one that works, right? There's a little more science to it now to build a base and grow on that base.
And Jeff says you don't know about the digital stuff. Come on.
Well,
no, I'm kidding. At the time with the Power Rider, are they going in with the expectation? I don't know, maybe not. Like, okay, we're just hoping to make $2 million off this, and then it does over $100 million. Do they have that mindset of what they are guesstimating it's going to produce?
Well, I think again, this is the evolve. How the business has evolved. Back then, I mean, by the time you committed to doing an infomercial, you were still spending a considerable amount of money to engage the contracts, the talent, get on set. I'm going to throw out a number, say you're going to spend $500,000, $200,000 to $500,000 shooting an infomercial. That doesn't include all of, so, and yeah, so are you going to throw it up there and it didn't work? Still, even back then, I would say only 1 of 10 infomercials that tested, were successful. And it's very kind of you to, interview me now and talk about the ones that worked, but, we'd have to have a 5-hour interview about the ones that didn't work, right? And I think the best line back then was, well, Ed, if you're going to be in this business, what you do is you take the rear view mirror and you throw it out the window, because what's behind you doesn't count, right? And the other line was, you know what, Ed, sometimes you just got to get amnesia. So, that game, which was, but you knew you were in Vegas and you're putting your chip down on the circle. And so the big players were putting down big chips, but it was still the roulette wheel, right? To some extent, is our message going to resonate? So I like to say, if the hit ratio was, 1 out of 10, I'd like to say at that period of time where I was fortunate to work with great relationships with people in Los Angeles, with people in New York, with people in Florida, I was fortunate to do a lot better than those ratios. But it doesn't mean to say that you still don't have stuff that doesn't hit, and a lot of that's, is sometimes it's beyond your control. Especially when you're engaged as a writer and a producer, you're engaged but you're not the one that's done the show costing and, and basically done the margins and everything else. And, if they don't get that working correctly, if they don't come to you with their homework done, then it's going to be hard to make something work. So there were a lot of times where I think, the wrong ingredients were in a pitch or an offer. And, the other thing was how thorough were people in their product sourcing, because the infomercial business was famous back then for, and I'm talking not just infomercial, but 2-minute spots. I mean, I can't remember the name of the product, but I remember the one that was a fan, and they showed it in the commercial. The fan was, like cooling you down when it was really hot in your apartment, but it was wireless, and the fan came, and the thing, to get it to go, you had to open a window and have some wind. That was an actual product that sold in a 2-minute spot, right? So there were those guys, right? And so I think part of it too is has any kind of marketer, and I don't care, these are people that come to us today still for, production. We just, I can't, I'm thinking of, we just did something like for 25 radio spots, 25 radio spots in one day, and got them out to, delivered to the client 2 days later. And they're on air on the weekend, right? So it's sometimes like I look at it, and now it's a combination of having that creative insight, really, really honing the unique selling proposition, working with the client on it, and then execution. And now it's speed to market. We used to, in those days of producing those infomercials, it'd be a 6-month process from the time we ideated an infomercial till it was ready to go to air. And, then you've got your test. And then, of course, depending on your test result, you've got to gear up manufacturing. So a lot of time you were 6 months, even from a positive test, to actually being able to go and blow it up, right? Today, I think I look at, I can think of one spot. We ran the QB up here for a while, and everybody knows the QB exercise machine. But those guys, like, that's more recent. They had funding, I think, to really go to television and deliver television budget. And it became kind of like a hybrid of direct response and brand. So I call that, where we've come now to like performance marketing. And we think, we're a performance marketing company. And we have a track record of 30 years of data in every category you can imagine. We know how to execute, and we can be a great partner to help grow products. But that's, there's still that back and forth to really get there and build credibility. And I think the beauty of it today is that there's so much technology, and there's so much ability to, get to scale on a path that, has been plowed a bit for you. But it's still on you to kind of like be better than the next guy, and to get the messaging correct, and figure out how you're going to stand on top.
And I'm wondering, I love watching old and new infomercials. I mean, I learn a lot from them, and people have put lots of time, energy, and money into these things. I'm curious some of your favorite infomercials. Like, I remember watching the Ron Popeil ones. I don't know if you remember the Blue Blocker, Joe Sugarman, the Blue Blockers ones. I had Joe on the show, and just some amazing knowledge there. I don't know if it's the Jack LaLanne or the ShamWow. What are some of your favorite infomercials and some of the things that you learned, even if you worked on them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would always watch. Like, I worked a few times with Kathy Mitchell, and she was, we did the sandwich makers and a lot of kitchen products, but, she was just so genuine, and she wanted people to make this food in their homes, whatever her product was. So I loved her infomercials. I obviously have a special place for Jack LaLanne. I did so many shows with him. But again, as I shared before, he just wanted people to feel better, right? So I loved his shows, and I loved the fact that he could react, because he'd do the shows with his wife. Like they actually started, and they went and they had him work with a co-host in Florida on HSN. And it was, the results were okay. But when he got up there with his wife beside him, and there was that energy that the two of them had, and the camaraderie and the fun they created, people knew that was genuine. It created trust. He was like, to me, an icon of the fitness business. And I think I know that Arnold Schwarzenegger, at Jack's 90th birthday, which was in Los Angeles, he was there, and I remember Arnold got up and he talked about their time in the muscle pit in Los Angeles, and he said, he said, back then, Jack LaLanne, you kicked my ass. Today, you still kick my ass. And they were, and I have pictures with them, and I just think, yeah, he's like, he was genuine, and I think he had such a great message for people. And I think a lot of it, even if you go, those guys, like he was obviously worked with Joe Weider, and it was the first actual universal exercise machine. And then, of course, his relationship with Arnold. And I just think that he's an icon. And so I'd have a hard time like saying he's not some of my favorite infomercials. I do like Emerald, has done some. I didn't work with him, but I watched his infomercials. He created, a pretty good brands around cookware. So I think he was pretty strong. I look back and I think outside the box, like I'm trying to think in the best pitchman.
What about the ShamWow?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I have to put Vince on the list. So, Vince, that was in our early development as a company. He came and started running the commercial in Canada, the ShamWow, and we really didn't know who he was, and it was a very, very small budget in the beginning. But that guy, man, he hammered it out at the LA flea market, and he honed his pitch. He shot his own commercials. He built that up from, just basically believing in himself as a pitchman, and his product worked, and he sold a lot of ShamWows. And in those days, we would have a media party every year in the summer. And I remember we brought up celebrities, and, sometimes they came. No one got more attention than Vince. Everybody wanted their picture taken in the shadow. So, and he was he's a very good pitch man. So, if we're going back in history and talking about those times,
what was it about him that when you think about him as a pitchman, what was it?
Well, I think that if you watch him, and I don't know, his full, like everybody, these pitchmen, they overcome adversity. Like they learn it, the hard way. They're actually, he would say something like, if I can't do $300 a day at the LA flea market, then it's not a product, but he would learn it. What I admire about, and another name that comes to mind is like Billy Mays. Like how many infomercials and shows did Billy Mays do? And he was a solid pitch man, right? But these guys, they honed their pitch, maybe not always in flea markets, but they would test their pitch. And, that would be.
And like, Billy Mays, I think he was famous for one of them was OxyClean, I believe, right?
Yeah, OxyClean. Yeah. And then actually, I don't know why, maybe I saved him for last, but, Tony Little is a good friend that I've worked with for many, many years. So The Gazelle infomercial was probably one of the first fitness infomercials. And I worked with Tony on that. But this is a pitch man. This is kind of a guy. So to get the Gazelle pitch right, I remember I'd fly down to Florida, we'd sit on his balcony, and I'd turn the tape machine on, and I'd say, go. And then we would just go back and forth. And I said, well, what if you say this? What if you, and I don't know how many hours we would do that. And then finally, somewhere out of that, came the script for the infomercial. But as I've said before, when we got into the studio, it also just had its own life, because you got there, you'd put together the work, you tried to hone the pitch, and he is still doing it today. I mean, I got to take my hat off to Tony Little. He's still on air. He's still selling product. He's still, the last thing we talked about was an electric bike, but he's just, he's constantly working at it. He stays in shape. And I think, he's definitely one of the icons of the infomercial business.
And I just want to be the first one to thank you. I always learn a lot from anything direct response. And so I appreciate you sharing the lessons, the stories. And I want to encourage people to check out kingstarmedia.com to learn more. And we'll see everyone next time. Ed, thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Okay, take care.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.